Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers, and I'm looking at a perennial book, if I can put it that way. It's this white book here, virtually no visuals at all on the cover. It's from LexisNexis Tolly, the Butterworths organisation. It's Financial Act Handbook 2012. Very important piece of legislation. The whole purpose of Parliament being to collect money and then distribute it. And the Finance Act is what this is all about. Now, there are a huge number of people involved in producing this, so I'm not going to name them. But what I'm going to say is to draw attention to the book, because many people may not know too much about it at the moment. We've given it the title, now available, the annual annotated copy of the Finance Act from Tolly's. That's what it is. It's published annually, and this handbook on the Finance Act has become indispensable for practitioners, having to cope with the fact that this year's Finance Act, which was 2012, which was given the royal assent on the 17th of July 2012, is most probably the longest ever. Referring to the ever-increasing length of the legislation, one of the distinguished contributors, writing in the introduction to the handbook, declares, quote, that the advocates of legislation that is simpler and shorter, though the one does not necessarily imply the other, do seem to have lost the battle, if not the war. A sign of the times, unfortunately, with a mounting tide of new and detailed legislation every year. This is the book itself. There's a little bit of blurb on the back, not much. It's very heavy. It's running to something approaching, let's have a look and see, yes, nearly 700 pages. You can see there's quite a detailed index at the back, which is very helpful, I think, for legislation. Then what you've got here is you can see the Act itself in all its glory. I'm not going to try and push it too far with the book, but what I do like is there is actually a very detailed introduction right at the beginning, which sets out exactly what Parliament has been trying to achieve. Now, I mentioned about the contributors, and they are listed there. You can see them in alphabetical order. There are a lot of them. I'm just giving you a cross-section there because it's been a huge endeavour by a lot of people. I think it's very useful to read Andrew Park's foreword, which gives you some idea of what the value of this book really is to people. The difficulty, I think, with Finance Act legislation, these particular regular acts, is that they are very difficult to understand and really very difficult to fathom because it's so complicated. However, I think that the Tolly's approach is probably the best that we have, because it sets out the legislation and it then tries to give you some pointers as to what it all means. Let me just bring to a conclusion our comments by saying that following careful study and analysis, each specialist, which I mentioned in the work, has prepared carefully judged annotations explaining each provision with the aim of helping practitioners to find immediate answers to all but the most obscure queries of the Act. We've all said we have too much legislation and it's too detailed, but this is a prime example of what we have. But do remember, it's dealing with the state's finances, so it's understandable that we're going to have this sort of detail. As there's no table of contents as such, therefore, the introduction does the best job of all, which is right at the front, of course, by summarising the contents of the handbook itself, and as I've indicated, there's a good index at the back. Linking the legislation and commentary together in a convenient paperback format is the definitive handbook, we think, on the Finance Act, and it's aimed at providing expert advice for expert advisors. The contributors have done just that, and I'd like to thank them and the Tolly organisation through LexisNexis Butterworths for the continuing support they give us, because it's invaluable. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.